Warning: the following episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast contains video images which you may find graphic. The video images are images taken from various clips and videos depicting and exploring the homeless crisis in Philadelphia. Viewer discretion is advised.
Virtually lawless streets, record unemployment, and a completely wide open drug market. Why did it happen here? Why is it so concentrated in this area? And when did all this start? Wow. A war zone.
If you hear the sirens in the background, it's constant. They're just constantly going.
It's not easy or safe, but it wasn't always like this. Back in the day, there was an economic boom in Philly, with the textile and carpet manufacturing, just to name a couple. And people came to fill the need for workers in those factories. And it was a real melting pot of working class citizens. But a downturn in manufacturing happened here in the 60s and 70s, and those employment needs soon dried up. In fact, by 1975, about 75% of those industrial jobs and businesses were gone, moved away, or simply went out of business. And then came the poverty, the drugs, the crime. The 1970s, it was speed and cocaine, sold by city gangs and supplied by the mafia. The 1980s was the crack epidemic. And the 1990s came the heroin craze. A high-purity, snortable heroin flowed into this area and took over.
The interesting and powerful conversation I had with the Deputy Chief at Turning Point for Children in Philadelphia, and he's also a former managing director for the city of Philadelphia, Mr. David Fair, a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, who also runs several non-profits in Philadelphia on homeless initiative non-profits, and he also operates several mentorship programs. Was an activist before he started working in social services. He's very involved in policy in the city of Philadelphia. And he has also worked with the mayor before in the past on several initiatives. He was part of the fight for equity and justice during the civil rights movement, during the fight for HIV/AIDS. He's going to be in a documentary on HBO, Eyes on the Prize, the remake of the PBS series Eyes on the Prize. But this particular documentary series looks at the fight for justice in terms of medical justice, HIV/AIDS, and how African American, the discrimination in the 1980s and 90s. But we had him on the show. We did it, and we interviewed him about that before, and we had several breaking news stories with Mr. David Fair talking about the fact that his agency, Turning Point, will be transferring out or ending the COA program, the Community Umbrella Agency program, the agencies or the program that is responsible for providing case management or human services case management on behalf of the Department of Human Services. There is some kind of issue, and he talked about that at the beginning of the show. What we did, we broke this podcast up into three different pieces. There's part 1, part 2, and part 3, because it's about an hour and a half, and each part deals with a different particular matter. The first part he talks about the issue of case management, the struggles at Turning Point for Children, and what Turning Points have to go through and had to endure as a result, and why they are ending their core services, which is breaking news, which is breaking news, and it's interesting that we are providing that commentary to you today. But that part 1 looks at them ending their core services and what's happening with child, youth, and family services, the issue of the insurance being too high, so on and so forth. We get into that a bit. Then in part 2, we talk about the issue of homelessness and the research that we did, which suggests that homelessness was actually increasing. But one particular issue some information that was quite interesting as I sat with Mr. Fair talking about the issue of homelessness and human services, we talk about the issue of shelters. And one of the things that was striking, and one point that seemed to have come out based on the conversation we had, was one of the things that we gleaned was that shelters are temporary. Shelters are never fixed to the issue of homelessness. And there are a lot of homeless shelters in Philadelphia and various cities across the world, in the U.S. And some of the shelters operate within the winter time. By summer, they are closed. Okay, so if and the way in which we conduct homelessness studies, especially how the city had done it, was to literally count the individuals who report to be homeless. Okay, and so in some periods homelessness probably will be high, and in some periods it's going to be low. In the summer, homelessness is going to be higher than in the winter probably. But so far, what we know now is that homelessness is increasing, and there was a study that suggests that it was decreasing. But then when we checked, we realized that no, it's actually on the rise. Homelessness is on the rise. Poverty is on the rise. Child poverty has doubled since 2019 or 2020. Child poverty has doubled. Child and youth homelessness, especially those between 17 and 18 or 17 and 24, and those aging out of foster care programs. And Turning Point have a foster care program outside of their CYS program, or outside of their core program is their foster care program. And so there are those in the foster care system between 17 to 24. Once you get to 17, you start to age out, and sometimes there is no homeless shelters and programs for them. He talks about that. And so while we might think about, well, the city providing shelters is not a fix. Shelters is a temporary fix to homelessness. Homelessness is more permanency. There's more permanency when you think about homelessness. When you think about having a home or persons living in a home, that speaks to the issue of permanency. Living in shelters, it's temporary. It's not permanent. Okay. So one of the things, so we talked about that, the issue of homelessness, and the fact that shelters does not provide a lasting answer or fix to the issue of homelessness. And we talk about the lack of resources. Of course, he said recently in a LinkedIn comment, referencing a report by the Public Integrity Commission on homelessness, a homelessness study that was done in Philadelphia, which shows that homelessness is increasing. And part of the issue we have with homelessness is that the city is not properly identifying people who are homeless. That's also another issue with homelessness, the issue of identification. If we can't properly identify people who are homeless, then we can't provide the kind of services that they need to bring them out of homelessness. So the city has so there's a study that referenced that. And so we talked about that at length, and we talked about other issues in case management. We also talk about core case managers getting an increase, the fact that we're still seeing where agencies are offering case managers 45,000, 50,000, when recently there was a report that core case managers' salaries have increased from 53,000 up to about 60,000. But he talked about that and why there are permutations. That's what's coming up next on the Neoliberal Realm podcast, brought to you by the Neoliberal Corporation, serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. And I hope to this show I want to have an opportunity to speak with some people on the streets about homelessness. We want to find at least one or two people who are homeless and to have a quick conversation with them and include them in the show. But that's what's coming up on the next end, at the other side. This is the Neoliberal Realm podcast. I'm Ronaldo McKenzie. Hi, David. I can't hear you. 1 minute. Well, I'm doing very well, David. I'm doing very well. I recently got some bad news about my mom. She was admitted in the hospital recently.
Oh, wow.
And we're given an option. So it's not the medical field is on the medical side with loved ones, not so good. I've lost a loved one. who died at the resort. My mom is not well. She's in the hospital. I mean, I think they released her yesterday, but she's battling a very rare form of cancer called thymoma, and it's very rare. And so we're dealing with that. My mom is, probably about to be 80 years old, and
Is
we
she
love
in the
her.
States?
She's in the U.S. Yes,
Yeah.
but she normally spends the summer in the U.S. Sorry, summer in the U.S., winter in Jamaica.
Okay.
Yes,
That
yes,
makes
yes.
sense. That makes
But
sense.
medical care, I mean, her medical care, her medical care is very expensive, wherever you are in the
I
world.
got it.
And it's been very stressing for us. It's been stressing for me. I lost a dad, and
Imagine. Oh,
and I don't want to lose a mom right now.
that's
Yes. How are you doing? I mean, I know you also have some you have some issue dealing within your own family. How is everything?
yeah, pretty ill. There's not
Yes,
much that can be done, so we're
yes,
trying to keep a positive outlook.
yes, yes, yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
and Turning Points has been going through a lot of changes since we no longer. I don't know if I think we might have talked about this. We
Yes,
know.
and I'm happy that because I wanted welcome to another powerful episode of the Nearly Own podcast. My podcast producer, co-producer, and podcast manager has stepped in for a small studio episode of the Nearly Own podcast. Welcome, Dante. Welcome to the studio audience. Welcome to people or wherever you are in the world. I'm Ronaldo McKenzie, and this is another powerful episode of the Nearly Own podcast. This is citizenship journalism, according to Elon Musk. We have with us, and actually, it's not according to Elon Musk, according to Ronaldo, because I've been promoting citizenship journalism for about 2, 3 years now, and it seems to be catching on. But it's good to be part of this movement, the podcast movement. We need support us. But we're going to talk about a very important issue. And with me is Mr. David Fair, who has been is no stranger to the Nearly Around podcast. He's been with us. We're happy to have him. He's going to be tough. When it comes down to social work and child, youth, and family services, human services, welfare, but not only that, because he will tell you before he started working in social work, before he was an activist working with to advance equal pay and so on in the city of Philadelphia. In fact, he will be coming on HBO for documentary series, Eyes on the Prize. They interviewed him talking about his work in Philadelphia in the 1980s as it relates to minimizing, mitigating, responding to the HIV/AIDS crisis. So it's great to have you on the show again. Thank you so much, David.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Listen, we want to talk about homelessness because I saw your post recently about homelessness. Because I saw your post about homelessness. I think some time ago you reposted an article that says, "Where are the homeless children?" And that's the title of the article published in publicintegrity.org. Where are the homeless children? This struggling city isn't finding them. Probably you could touch on the article a little bit. I read a little bit about it, and you responded by saying this is yet another disgrace regarding our city's lack of response to the crisis of homelessness. But just so when I saw that post, and by the way, welcome to the Neoliberal podcast. By the way, so I'm trying to get a lot into one little break. But welcome to the show, David. David is the deputy chief at Turning Point, former managing director at the city of Philadelphia. So, and I'm a graduate of University of Penn, my alma mater. Welcome to the show. We're going to talk about that, your response to the lack of, in terms of the article that was written recently in Public Integrity, talking about the lack of response to homelessness. And so welcome to the show.
It's an honor, as always, to be here.
Yes. What should we touch on first? Maybe we should touch on what's going on in Turning Points, because I know recently you were on the show and we talked about the fact that they are getting rid of their community umbrella agencies. And that, and you're one of the largest community umbrella agency Turning Point. You're one of so what has been the response? How has it been going? What's been going on at Turning Points?
Well, the past few months, we've been transitioning the services to about 3,000 children to other agencies who are picking up these services. The problem we ran into was that we had 4 of these community umbrella agency contracts. More than half of the children involved formally with the child welfare system were being serviced by Turning Points. And as with any large program, when you have every day you have 3,000 kids that you're trying to protect and take care of, things go wrong sometimes. And when they go wrong, sometimes they go seriously wrong. Rarely does it have anything to do with Turning Points. It often has to do with somebody in the family hurts somebody else in the family, or hurts a child, or DHS makes a decision to return a child to a family that's really not ready to keep that child safe, and something happens. The technicalities are that the city is immune from lawsuits. You can't get anything if you sue the city. You can't get any money or relief if you sue the city. Unfortunately, even though we operate, the community umbrella agencies operate under the cover of the license of the Department of Human Services, we don't have the same legal protection. So over the last 10 years, we've been doing core work. We've had about 13 lawsuits, which I don't think is so bad when you consider we've serviced almost 13,000 children during that period. But we got 13 lawsuits. All of them were serious.
Oh, wow.
I would say in 2/3 of those cases, Turning Points had a reasonably good argument that we were the wrong people to sue, because we didn't.
Right.
Our job is not taking care of the child. If somebody doesn't take care of the child, who hurts the child in the home, it's not. We can't prevent that from happening. We're not in the home 24/7, 365 days a year. But nonetheless, we get sued for that because the trial lawyers in the city recognize that our insurance companies would prefer, if somebody sues, they prefer to arrange some kind of settlement agreement so that the case doesn't go to court. Because if the case goes to court, the fact that it's a child who got hurt means that a jury is likely to give a much bigger settlement than you can negotiate before you go to court. And so it becomes almost a scam. It's like the trial lawyers look for these cases, and I'm convinced that there are people at DHS who report their confidential information to these trial lawyers, because there's no way they could have known some of these things without somebody from DHS sharing it with them. When the trial lawyer gets the information, they file a lawsuit.
Yes.
Happens is our insurance company then gets involved. They tell us they want to settle the case because they don't want to have to pay an even bigger payout if we went to court. So it becomes a game where somebody shares confidential information with a trial lawyer. There's a couple of trial lawyers who specialize in this. They sue knowing that the insurance company is going to pay them a settlement. They negotiate a settlement, and then they go to the next case and do the same thing all over again. And what happened over the 10 years we've been operating, even though we've only had the 13 cases, the insurance companies became very nervous about giving us insurance in the first place, because they knew that whatever premium we paid, they would have to pay out more than that.
Right.
Because of the game that was being played by the trial lawyers. And so the bottom line is that in 2023, the year we're in,
Yes.
Insurance we got for this year, the premium, just the premium, cost $6.4 million
Oh,
to pay
wow.
the premium on the insurance. The payouts from the insurance were larger than $6.4 million. It was close to 8 or
Okay.
9 million. So the insurance company wound up losing $2 or $3 million a year because of these lawsuits. And so, and
So,
the
by the way, I
premium,
saw in terms of over the 10-year period, the total lawsuits, these what, 15 lawsuits, is it 13 or 15,
13
13?
lawsuits.
There's about $8.9 million, and over that's what they have costed the agency.
Well, so it doesn't actually cost, well, yes, the cost of
Yeah.
$6.4 million this year to purchase the insurance. That's the premium.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Up until this year, DHS has been willing to pay basically for that $6.4 million. They've been willing to pay for the insurance. This year,
Okay.
they told us that it was getting to be too high and they weren't going to cover the insurance. And we don't have the money to cover the insurance. So we live only on the basis of our DHS contracts. So if DHS doesn't cover the insurance, there's no way to cover the insurance. And the bottom line is that meant we couldn't continue to do community umbrella agency services because we
Okay.
couldn't afford to get new insurance when our insurance expires in December. So that's why
Okay.
we had to give up the COAs.
As of now, because I know we did a show some time ago, I think it was in July, announcing that I think that Turning Point will be transferring their course to other agencies. So
Yes,
has that started to happen as yet, or has
yes,
it?
3 of them have been fully transferred. There's
Okay.
one that gets transferred as of November 1st. That
Okay.
will be on November 1st. We will no longer have any COA services being offered by Turning Points. Meanwhile, we have a number of other high quality programs that don't have these kinds of problems. We have the largest foster care program in the city with almost 900 children who are in our care through the foster care program. We have a program that helps kids in foster care find family members they might have lost touch with, so they
Yes.
can have the support of their families while they're in foster care and potentially even go to live with those what we call kinship relationships so that
Okay.
they don't have to stay in the foster care system. We have a variety of services targeting older youth who transition out of the foster care system.
Yes.
That is a big problem. The city provides no support for a child once they leave the foster care system.
And I guess this is it's a very good place to transition into, to transition. I mean, I still wanted to ask you about the course. What's going to happen to all of the workers? So are they going to be working for Turning Point or are they going
No,
to be
the
working?
workers move over with the contracts. So nobody's
Okay.
losing their jobs in this process. They're just working
Okay.
for a different agency now.
And have you guys identified the agency as the transition a smooth process? Has there been any pushback? Has there been any kind of support from the city saying, "Hey, hold on, hold your brake. I mean, draw the brakes a bit. Let's see what we can do." Has there been any kind of way to resolve this particular issue?
It's been relatively smooth transition. There was one
Okay.
COA that DHS couldn't find a provider for. So
Okay.
that's the one that's still with Turning Points and is going to transition on November 1st. They finally did find another agency that was willing to take this on. I mean, it's a very scary thing because the other COAs, they haven't yet had the problem we had with insurance because they're
Okay.
a lot smaller than us. But as now, at least 2 of our COAs are now being run by people who already had COAs. So they have
Yeah.
double the size of their COAs, and they're going to start running into the same problems we ran into because they have too many cases.
Yeah.
Something's going to go wrong. Lawsuits are going to happen. Insurance
Yeah.
companies are going to say, "I'm not going to pay for that anymore." And
Right.
so the whole system is at risk in the longer term because it's the model is incorrect. The model
Yeah.
is unfair, really. We operate under the license of the Department of Human Services, so we should be protected in the same way the
Yeah.
Department of Human Services is. That doesn't mean that we believe the kids who get hurt should get screwed, but we do
Right.
believe that it's not the if it's unless it's our responsibility, unless we did something to endanger the child, we shouldn't be the ones that have to pay those settlements. Whoever
Yeah.
was guilty of the act should pay. So, for example, we had a case where a child, an older youth, about 17 years old, 17, 18 years old, who had a lot of problems. He was very violent. DHS had a hard time placing him. They came to us and said that we had to find a placement for this child. And we said we won't find a placement in a foster home because he's too violent. He needs to be in a facility where he can be monitored and taken care of that way. DHS ordered us to place the kid into a foster home. We had absolutely nothing to do with that decision. He killed the foster parent 3 days later.
Okay.
And it
Is
turned
it
out
recent?
he had actually killed another child in foster care a few
Oh,
days
wow.
after that. I mean, that's how violent this young man was. And
Yes.
we got sued, even though we had nothing to do with the decision to put the child in the foster home, even though there was nothing we could do to protect that foster parent. Because we don't, we're not in the home. We can't, and we didn't get any extra money for security or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it was an out of control young person, seriously mentally ill, a young person that everybody knew was violent. But DHS told us we had to place the kid in that home anyway. And we got sued, not DHS,
Yes.
not the child who committed the murder, but we were the only people out there that could be sued. That case is
And that is interesting. Why is it that you guys were the only one who could be sued? And I remember you mentioned this case. This case happened about a couple years ago?
yes.
Okay. What happened? What about? Can you give us a little bit back, because that's quite an interesting
But who
story.
else? The people who should have been sued were
Yeah.
the Department of Human Services, because they're the ones who made the decision to put a
Right.
violent child into the home of what turned out to be an elderly foster parent.
Okay.
It was a bad decision. The decision was made by DHS. It was not made by us. We were ordered to do it. And so DHS is accountable. The problem is you can't sue DHS because they
Yeah.
have immunity. So we're next in line. And
Okay.
so we get sued even though we had nothing to do with the situation. And the insurance company, in that particular case, we had a really good case if it went to court. That
Yes.
they're suing the wrong person. But the insurance company wouldn't go to court. This was a child who had killed a foster parent. They're convinced that a jury is going to give millions and millions of dollars to the family of this woman who sacrificed her life for this kid, and they don't want to pay that, so they work out an arrangement with the lawyers. In this case, the lawyers of the family of the foster parent, and they get a settlement that's at least cheaper than it would be if it was a jury verdict. And we're basically the innocent victims in the process. But we can't. But if we can't pay for the premiums, we can't do the work. Because at least with insurance, we have some kind of protection. DHS wanted us to keep operating these programs without the protection of insurance because they knew we couldn't pay for the insurance, and they decided they couldn't pay for the insurance either because it was getting to be too much. So now and everybody knew that we were having these problems because we had 4 CUAs. We were way too big. The chance of a problem happening when you have more than half of the children in foster care in your care are high. If you have 1 CUA, you have a lot fewer cases, a lot less likelihood of something happening. So DHS basically decided in the end that they would have more CUA agencies, but not as many CUAs in one agency, because at least that reduces some of the pressure on the insurance. They don't have to pay as much for the insurance. But over the years, next couple of years, the system is still the same system where children get hurt. there's going to be more lawsuits. They just won't be against Turning Points for Children. And when those
Okay.
lawsuits come out, DHS is going to suddenly be faced with none of the COAs being able to afford their insurance. And then they have a decision to make. Do they want to keep the COAs or do they want to pay for the insurance? This year, they said, we want to keep the COAs. We don't want to pay for the insurance. But now they're facing in a couple of years a cliff where the insurance
Yes.
cost will get so high that
Yes.
they'll have to decide, do we continue to do this way or do we change the way the system operates so that DHS shares some of the risk with the agencies that they fund?
I mean, especially the fact that they also take responsibility. They also make determinations as it relates to placement and so on. So, and as I listen to your case just now, it sounds that this is an issue of standing. If you were to go to the Supreme Court, maybe they'll dismiss the case because it is an issue of standing. They're suing the wrong party. While because you don't make the final determination, it is made by the Department of Human Services. So I am not sure how this was not pursued, but I guess as you said
the
that.
problem is we don't get to decide.
Okay.
The insurance company gets to decide
Yes,
whether or
yes.
not it goes to court. In most of the cases we've been sued on, we'd be happy to go to court because we can point the finger where the problem is and
Yes.
prove that we didn't cause this problem. But
Yes.
but the insurance companies don't want to go to court because they think it'll be more expensive. The payment, the outcome will, because everybody agrees the child was hurt. It's like, it's not a question whether the child was hurt, it's who's responsible. And if we're the only agency that can be sued, the insurance companies says, I'm not going to court because the settlement that the jury might give a $10 million settlement, whereas if we negotiate, we might get it down to 3 million or 4 million or 5 million. We're talking about millions of dollars here. And the insurance companies are in the business of making money.
That is true, and that is.
And they don't want to pay out more than they took in from the premiums that we paid. But consistently the last few years, our insurance companies have been paying out more money than we were paying in our per diems. I mean, I'm sorry, in our premiums. And so the result is they lost money on us, and they keep raising the premium because they have no other option than to try to get the money up front from us so that they're not losing the money. So it's not, in the end, it's all about protecting the money. Unfortunately, it's about the money. And the issue, what people don't talk about and should be talking about, is that under the COA system, there have been significantly fewer incidents that lead to lawsuits than there were those kinds of incidents before the COA started. There weren't the lawsuits because you couldn't sue DHS, but there was always, I mean, the newspapers were full of crises that happened in DHS cases before the COAs. And lately, the last 10 years, that's been reduced and I think it's because the COAs, with all the struggles that they have, still do a better job than what DHS was doing beforehand.
Yes. And what has been the response from the other community, from those agencies, nonprofit organizations that provide community umbrella services and that partner? What have been the response? I'm wondering if all the Turning Points, Tabor, all these other agencies, is it that they can come together, form a coalition to have a conversation with the department and with CYS and with the city to find out how we can move forward and to mitigate some of these challenges?
We have done that. We've done that. We've been doing that now for several years.
Oh.
The issue, but when we have made little progress.
Okay.
In terms of the city every year being willing to put up a little bit more money for the insurance. But now that the insurance premiums are so high, the city says it's not responsible for them to continue to do this, because the main reason it was happening to Turning Points was because we really grew too large. I think if we hadn't gotten as large as we got, we probably wouldn't have had the same problem. But because we have more than half of the kids who are at risk at Turning Points, and then the other 40% are spread out among 9 other CUA agencies.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, 6 other CUA agencies. Their risk is lower. We're taking all the risk for the system,
Right.
and it's got to be too expensive. But
Mm.
the silver lining of this, for me personally,
Yes.
and for Turning Points, is we finally get back to the business that we actually got involved in child welfare work back in 1835.
1835.
Our purpose in life since 1835 has been
Yes.
trying to help families be stable or get stable, and
Yes.
help families, help parents take care of their children. Foster care and in-home services and child welfare involvement is not, in my opinion, I mean, it's a response you have to have because some cases have to go that direction. But we send
Yes.
all sorts of families who are not having child abuse issues, they're having poverty issues, and they can't afford to feed their child, or they can't afford
Yes.
to you know, if I'm a mother working nights at a hospital to feed my children, I might not be able, I probably am not able to afford an overnight babysitter. So I
Yes.
wind up leaving my 8-year-old to take care of my 5-year-old and hope they keep safe and pray nothing happens. You know,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like and that can result in you losing your children because you've left
Right.
your child at home without protection, without care. And
Yes.
that has nothing to do with child abuse. That has to do with poverty. And
Yes.
what we want to do at Turning Points is start getting back to the business of supporting families to stay together, not be part of the system that's breaking them apart. And I'm
Okay.
actually very, very relieved to not be doing the cool work. It's important work. I don't mean any disrespect to the people doing the work, but for our agency, it's better for us to be trying to keep kids out of DHS than helping them once they're in DHS. Because once you're in DHS, you're following 75 pages, not an exaggeration, of
I know.
detailed regulations about how to
Yes.
operate. And it becomes about meeting your paperwork, doing your
Yes.
paperwork, as opposed to helping the family. We're now in the business of helping the family and screw the paperwork. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be a lot more fun for us. And I think we'll be a lot more successful.
That is really good. You've been around for since 1835. That's a very long time. And I wanted to ask, do you have the same problems with in terms of protection as it relates to the foster care, permanency, in-home services, family finding, or so on? Do you have the same kind of problems as you have
We
with?
don't have the same problems because our level of responsibility is different.
Okay.
When a co-worker is engaged with the family, they are taking responsibility for the safety of that child.
Okay.
And they still, in the foster care program, foster care services are actually you're being paid to have foster parents to take care of the children. You're not being paid to take care of the children yourself. The co-worker has the responsibility for the child. We have the responsibility to make sure the foster parent is adequately trained, is supported, that if issues arise, we can help the foster parent deal with those issues. It's a different approach in the child welfare system.
Okay.
But it's not involving, we really don't in our foster care program interact directly with the child very often. I mean, when we go to visit to make sure the home's okay, we check in and make sure the child's okay, but we don't have anything like the 75-page responsibilities of the co-workers.
Yes.
We're just there to say, yeah, the child looks okay. If we see something wrong, we contact the co-worker and they have to deal with it. We train the foster parents, we support the foster parents, we pay the foster parents, we do all the work around the foster parent, and that's what our foster parent program is about. And our other programs are more prevention oriented. Keep the child away from DHS. I mean, I think I've said this before on one of your podcasts. When I
You
was
did.
director of prevention services at DHS, I like to think I was the only person who had a good job at DHS, because my job
Yes.
was keep children and families from ever meeting a DHS worker. And that's what
Yeah.
we're about at Turning Points. We don't, DHS does the best job it can do. I'm not trying to put them down. They're doing the job that they're legally mandated to do. But the reality is, if we would just help these poor families
Yes.
to be able to be stable and help people get jobs, help people get mental health services for themselves or their kids, help them find a place to live if they're homeless. If we would just do those kinds of things, we
Yes.
would reduce the number of kids who actually need to be involved in DHS, because very few families are hurting their children. Many families are not able to take care of their children because they're just too poor.
When turning points enter the picture, we make a difference. We strive to keep siblings together. We provide hands-on assistance in getting kinship families certified. Since 2014, Turning Points has assisted 3,500 children with in-home and foster care services, helped 37 children get adopted, and 289 children reunify with their families. They've certified more than 350 foster parents. Your donations help Turning Points to be a leader in building stronger families and creating bright futures. Your donations help Turning Points offer essential resources that immediately meet the needs of thousands of families, so you can give with confidence that your Turning Points team is already on the ground providing hope and stability for children and their families. Together we can build stronger families and brighter futures. turningpointforchildren.org. And I'm happy that this brings us into the next point. We segue into the next point, which is quite interesting, because the initial reason for doing this show is to talk about homelessness and to also respond to and this is so we just concluded with part 1 of the podcast. Now we're going into part 2. Part 2 is powerful as well, because you talk about poverty, and by the way, the U.S. Census Bureau just released a report saying that as at today or last month, poverty among children has doubled. It's at 12 point something percent. Especially since they got rid of the COVID era taxes. Right. And so in a sense, are we going to see more homelessness? And you actually responded some time ago to a report, and if I could, I'm going to bring up the report here. I have it here. And this is I saw you said recently, I'm going to bring it up. This is it. No, that's not it. Here we go. You said this is yet another disgrace regarding our city's lack of response to the crisis of homelessness. In fact, I am going to share my screen. Share screen. I will share my screen. Here we go. Right, you might be seeing this right now. So you said, yeah, this is another disgrace. This is in regards to an article that says, where are the homeless children? This struggling city isn't finding them. But before I touch on that, I'm happy. When I saw this, it was quite interesting, and I just recently saw this a couple of days ago, because some time ago saw a report from Greg Goldman, and you might be seeing my LinkedIn right now, I'm not sure. But according to Greg Goldman, sometime, I think 1 month ago, Greg Goldman, he's the social impact leader, educator, connector, advisor. He was also my professor at University of Pennsylvania some years ago, 2011, I believe. But he wrote he commented saying, excellent update on the state of homelessness in Philadelphia and the city's success in reducing homelessness through compassion, persistence, and the active partnership of allies business. And then, of course, I read a report, and then I'll bring up the report here. And I'm not sure if you're still. Are you seeing my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so there's another. Okay, great. So there is another report from the Office of Homelessness. According to the Office of Homelessness News, August 9th, it says how many people are unhoused and living on the streets. And according to the report, Philadelphia has made real progress on addressing unsheltered homelessness over the past 6 years. We have the lowest number of people on the streets among the major US cities. Our last point in time count in January, which was still all the way in January, showed 706 people living in unhoused, a 35% drop from 218. How did we get there? We invested in solutions that work. Housing first. Supportive housing, providing supportive housing is more than 90% effective in preventing a return to homelessness. And according to the office and to the report, they were able to invest in supportive housing. But then when I saw that, I remember the podcast I did with you talking about the lack of resources in the city. If I can find that, you had said some time ago, I will be testifying to the Philadelphia City Council on the incredibly serious crisis taking place in the child welfare workforce in the city. In my view, we basically have a system that is barely able to keep its finger in the dike. And our elected officials and government bureaucrats act like it's business as usual. While I can't link so on and so forth. But one of the things we talked about is that from homelessness to the lack of resources and funding, poor educational outcomes, deplorable wages, and then the fluff of paperwork which does not do anything to deal with real issues in child welfare. The lack of funding is an issue, okay? And here we're talking about poverty is on the rise. So when I saw the report from Greg Goldman and this report, I'm like, whoa! So I wrote a report saying, amazing. I was impressed. I was like, this is amazing. I'm like, how? So I was blowing it up, talking to people about it and retweeting, reposting, commenting. But then I said, let me do some research myself. So I reached out to some people from Project Homes and various people in the industry. We did some investigation at the Nail, but I did some investigation, calling several people. And then we realized that that's not what had happened. And I actually tweeted something. I said, news update. I recently reposted Mr. Greg Goldsman's comment about homelessness in Philadelphia, about it being decreasing. However, this may not be the case. And we interviewed David Fair last year, actually it was this year, indicating the crisis in Philly regarding homelessness. And let me share my screen again so that you have it. We'll see what I'm reading from. I'm reading from this. So, right. So I recently reposted Mr. Greg Goldsman's comment about homelessness in Philadelphia decreasing. However, this may not be the case. And we interviewed David Fair last year, indicating the crisis in Philly regarding homelessness, especially among young people. So we were intrigued by this report so quickly after hearing that homelessness is worsening. We may have to update this story as my initial follow-up with Project Home on the issue based on conversation today with several managers there who are indicating that homelessness in Philadelphia is actually on the rise, and that the report cited about the reduction is not accurate. It uses a methodology that does not take into consideration all factors and experiences of homelessness. Of course, all factors and experiences of, and that was my and that was what that was the report. And then you came out, and then this report came out. Where are the children, homeless children, the homeless? Where are the homeless children? Struggling City isn't finding them. So how are we going to provide social welfare if we're not finding them? How can we have a report about children and we can't find them? So I said, let me talk with you about this. What is going on regarding homelessness in the city? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? I mean, are they able to find them? What about the lack of funding we're hearing? What is going on in the city?
Well, it's as with everything else, it's not a sort of black and white kind of issue. I mean,
Okay.
The report that Greg was referencing is an accurate representation of what the Office of Homeless Services was doing. And
Yes.
the Office of Homeless Services, I don't think would argue that it interacts with every homeless person in Philadelphia. They're saying
Yeah.
within their system that the
Okay.
number of homeless, um, in their system, the number of people living on the street who are homeless had gone down. However,
Yeah.
the way they come up with that number is one day a week. I mean, I'm sorry, one night a month. Now that's wrong too. One night a year. One night a
Oh,
year. They send people out onto the street to count homeless people. It's not a scientific, it's not a scientific study. It's
yes.
who was visible on that particular night. And
Okay.
they do the same thing in undercounting youth homelessness,
Yes.
younger homeless people between like 17, 24. They think they consistently argue that there's about 500 of those youth in Philadelphia. And the
Yes.
reason they say that is because they have enough beds to handle 500 youth. If they had 800 beds, they would have 800 youth. If they had a
Okay.
thousand beds, they'd have 1,000 youth. Because the school district, which does an actual count and survey of school students in Philadelphia, found that 8,000 children under the age of 18 were homeless in the course of
Yes.
a particular year. And OHS is saying there's 500 because the only reason they say there's 500 is because that's all they are able to serve. So
Okay.
it's so it's not
Yes.
that they're mislead. They're really not misleading people, but they are saying that in terms of the world, the part of the world they are responsible for, things are getting better. But they're
Okay.
not. I don't believe that OHS would pretend that that means we're making progress on the
Okay.
homeless issue generally. Most people who are homeless end up connecting with the homeless services system, but a
Right.
large number never connect with the homeless service system. They're mentally ill, or they just don't want to be in a shelter, or they have other kinds of issues going on. And we don't count them because they're not part of our system.
Yes.
They're choosing not to be part of the system, so we don't think it really matters that they're out there. And it's important. And if you're an agency like the Office of Homeless Services, you want people to believe you're doing a job, you're getting your job done. And
Yes.
so it's a little manipulative in arguing that in their part of the world that they do services in, things are getting better. But they don't count. They don't try to count, except one
Yes.
night a week, one night a year. They don't try to count the number of people who never touch them who are homeless. And there's hundreds and thousands of those people on the street.
Yes, they are. And and if I were to reference, according to Greg, and I retweeted this, he said that school district nationwide underestimate the number of homeless students they serve, cutting children off from assistance meant to help. According to the story, a study from Research for Action, a Philadelphia-based nonprofit, found that the city has the lowest homeless student identification rate of the nation's 20 largest school district, which is an inability to identify problem situations or problem people who are, it creates a social problem as well. That means we're not reaching
Exactly.
those people.
Exactly. I mean,
Okay.
we pride ourselves on helping the people we are able to find, and we pretend that that's where we should stop, instead of recognizing that there's probably almost as many people out there that we're not able to find, or we're not able to
Yes.
engage in our services, or get them to come in from the cold. We're not able to do that, and so we think, well, we can't be responsible for them. We have to praise ourselves for the work we are getting done. And it's a natural human
Yeah.
tendency. You want to feel good about the work you put your life and soul into every day. But we can't, as a city, as a community, we can't lie to ourselves about what the problem is. And that is what
Yes.
we do. We think that homelessness equals whatever OHS is dealing with. And we don't count the people who don't fit into the OHS system. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people with mental illness. That's a lot of people who are young people. It's people who are sex workers. We don't count them as
Yeah.
homeless, but they're all,
Yeah.
but they usually are. And and the scary part is we know we're undercounting. And
Ah.
instead of putting more resources into doing the kind of work that the Center for
Yeah.
Public Integrity did, that Research for Action did, if they're capable of finding homeless people on the street, why can't the city find those people? And
And that's what
that's a
he has to.
question that still has to be answered.
Yes, yes, yes. And by the way, according to the story, the district did not immediately respond to requests for comment. I wonder why the city is not requesting to comment as it relates to the finding. Because before COVID, according to the report, the school district of Philadelphia identified less than 5% of children living in poverty as less than 5% of children living in poverty as homeless. So less than 5% of children living in poverty are homeless. That's according to the city. The city had reported that. Now, the identification rate hovered around 10% for most of the other districts in the study. However, but now, according to the report, it is saying that let me see there's some more report here. According to the report, that the Pennsylvania Department of Education mandate extra training and monitoring for districts that struggle to identify homeless students. So Philadelphia is one of those districts, or I mean, sorry, not Philadelphia. There are some districts within Philadelphia that is struggling to identify homeless students, and they suggest that charter school authorizers should review how applicants plan to support homeless students before approving new schools, so on and so forth. They also talk about children of families in the suburban also encounter problems with being identified as homeless. And but one powerful part I want to get to is this particular section. It says homeless students often struggle in school. Are there even more significant challenges than children in Philadelphia face? And this is quite. And it says, how can school address the problem? It says that this is not just a local issue, but the state policy. State policy. The state has not been doing that. They have not been providing the kind of support that the city needs. We know about supportive housing, but according to this report, we need more policy and we need more support. And of course, to piggyback on what you had said some time ago, you said that the lack is a disgrace in terms of the support. So there is support, but there are people saying that there is no support. There are not enough support. So how do you have to say about it as it relates to the level of support and at the policy level? Do you think as a city we are responding to homelessness properly? Now, no, we're not identifying them, and now we're hearing that there's lack of resources. I'm not sure if that is true.
Well, it's no secret that people who don't have political power don't get from government what people who do have political power get. We spend a lot more money on protecting high rises in Center City than we spend on homelessness in Center City. It's like the reality is that's why wouldn't want to criticize OHS as doing a bad job, because they're doing the best job they can do with the resources that they have. The problem is they probably have 50% of the resources that they should have. There was
Yeah.
another article that I posted on Facebook. I think it was another article I posted a comment on Facebook about in the Philadelphia Citizen by a guy named Josh Kruger, who's a columnist, and
Okay.
he sat down with his Excel spreadsheet and figured out that the city spends $59 million on the programs of OHS and homeless services that it provides every year, $59 million.
Okay.
Then he looked at the numbers of people who are not coming in to the OHS system and how much it would cost to house them. I mean, this is all just playing with numbers. He wasn't doing the research himself.
Okay.
What he discovered was that if we spent another $59 million, there's the first $59 million, keeping people in shelter, helping some people get back on their feet. He said if you put another $59 million, you could build enough housing for all of the homeless people in Philadelphia. And that's less than 1% of the city's budget. We could, if we doubled the budget of OHS and we spent half of that money building housing for homeless people, we wouldn't have a street homeless problem in Philadelphia. We just wouldn't.
Wow.
And there's an organization in Philadelphia called Pathways to Housing that works especially with mentally ill people with mental illness who are homeless. And they have an incredible track record, positive track record of getting those people off the street and stabilized in housing. They provide them all sorts of support so that they don't lose their apartments or their rooms, that they get the mental health treatment that they need, that they get support when it comes to food and things like that, to keep them off the streets. Our problem in Philadelphia is that our only solution to keeping people off the streets is to put them in shelter. And since I became a housing activist in the mid-1980s, the solution has always been there. Don't put them in shelter, put them in housing. And Josh's article basically proved that if we would just spend double the OHS budget, it still would only be less than 1% of the total $6 billion city budget. We could get those people off the street. And that's the other cause I've had, as I think I've mentioned here before, is I'm co-chair of a group called the Philly Homes for Youth Coalition.
Yes, right. That's what I was trying to remember. That continue.
We work to advocate on behalf of homeless youth.
Yes,
the coalition is amazing. It's got about 50 organizations that serve young people in the coalition, and then we have about 80 youth who are either homeless or had been homeless, who are part of the coalition. And every year we advocate to city council various solutions to youth homelessness, and every year they turn our back on us, and so does the mayor. For the first time, after 5 years of advocacy, OHS successfully applied for a grant from the federal government called the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. And so for the first time, the city has money to provide rental assistance specifically to homeless young people. It's a small amount compared to the need, but Turning Points is one of the partners in that. We are going to find housing for 40 young people with this rental assistance who are part of our programs. But 40 doesn't come close when there's probably 1,500 homeless youth on the streets of Philadelphia. I lost my train of thought, but basically, if we invest in the solutions as opposed to just the treatment, putting a person in a shelter is treatment. It's like you're taking them off the street temporarily.
Yes.
Eventually they leave, and they very often, maybe mostly, end up being on the street again. That we do have to get people off the street. We need shelters, but more importantly, we need apartments, and we need houses, and we need places for the families who are homeless. And it somehow offends the American psyche to actually provide a home to one family when another family has to struggle with everybody working 3 jobs to be able to pay for a home. It's
Yes.
like they're pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. So everybody should have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But the bottom
Yes.
line truth is, not everybody has bootstraps, and those who
Yes.
still deserve our support and still deserve our help.
You are so right, and if there are a lot. I've been speaking with several people. Some people don't believe that. What some people say, why should the city? Why should the state? Why should people use taxpayer dollars to provide for housing for people like these? But I say to people, you want to know why? I did say this to somebody the other day. You want to know why at the first world country, the US, you know why it's our responsibility. Go to Jamaica. Sorry, let me not use Jamaica. I apologize. Go to a global South country. Okay, go to a global South country that does not have enough money to provide social welfare and housing and support to the then you'll have a sanitation crisis. You have zinc fencing and slums and so on and so forth, and people living in certain areas. Like, wow, why those people live there? Because of this. So I'm saying, if you don't want your country to have facilities and situations where you have slums and so on and so forth, I think we have a responsibility, because people don't really understand some of these issues, to take care of the most needy in our society.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
that is each individual's responsibility to determine how much they feel they should try to help other people. There's a lot of
Yes.
selfish people who don't care about what
Yes.
happens to a homeless person. Fortunately, at least the 2 of us are not in that group. And
Yes, that is true.
those of us who do believe you are your brother's keeper, you are the
Yes.
person who is, if you can help somebody else, it's your responsibility to help that somebody else.
Yes.
If the more of us there are, the more likely it is we'll get rid of the problem of homelessness. But the person who told you, why should I care, is
Yes.
the reason why we have homelessness.
Yes,
Because
that is true.
all those people need help. As Josh's article showed, it wouldn't cost us very much in the big picture to help them. We just choose not to. And we can
Yes.
choose to help them. And then we would see a dramatic reduction in the number of homeless people, and especially the number of homeless people on the street. The other problem that we have, and this is a whole nother conversation, is that we have city agencies that provide social services to the community who don't work with each other. One of the
Ooh,
primary
yes.
reasons why we have so many foster youth, 40%, according to a real study that was done about 7 years ago, not the study that Greg was referring to.
Right, yes.
A study that was done by, I think it's the University of Chicago. I'm blanking out on the program.
Okay.
They did an intensive study of homelessness, youth homelessness in Philadelphia. And they determined that 40% of the kids who were living on the street, and they found like 1,100 of them, even though DHS says there's about 700 of them. There's 500 of them. They found 1,100 kids. 40% of them were kids who were in the foster care system and had left or had graduated out of the foster care system. And now I'm forgetting the point I was trying to make.
I know you're talking about, they just study you're referencing an article about another challenge that we're faced with as it relates to housing.
I'm blanking out on the point I was going to.
University of Chicago. You're talking about.
The problem is I talk too much and I forget what I'm talking about.
I know you were talking about University of Chicago. The study or some report.
Well, the point I was trying to make was that there were 40% of the kids. Oh, I know. 40% of the kids were in foster care. And of that 40%, something like 85% had mental health issues.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we have no system of mental health services for the population between 17 and 24. We have for the adult system, we have for the children's system, we don't have for the young adult system. We simply do not have the services. And if the Department of Behavioral Health and the Department of Human Services and the Office of Homeless Services all got blended their resources together, we could
Yes.
create a system for those kids who are falling through the cracks because they're homeless when they're 17 or 18 when they get out of the foster care system. They become sex workers. They become drug runners. They do whatever they can to survive because they can't get the services they need because our city departments don't blend their money together to come up with solutions. You have to, if you're a homeless kid, you go to the homeless service system, which is designed for older people, and they can't really help you. And if they think you have a mental health problem, they make a referral to a behavioral health system that will take 7, 8, 9, 10 months before you can even get an appointment.
Yes.
You know? And if all that's happening, you end up in the Department of Human Services and put in foster care because the other systems weren't there to help them. We need a blended system. We need a coordinated system of care that doesn't follow the departmental barriers, doesn't fall into those barriers, but figures out ways where we can put that money together in better solutions. The reason why Pathways to Housing is successful is that it takes the money from OHS and DHS and CBH and Department of Behavior,
Nice.
and it blends it together to help mentally ill people get off the street. But they shouldn't have to do that. It should be government that has already blended the money together because Pathways to Housing has a $3 million budget. The city of Philadelphia has a $6 billion budget. If we blended that money a little bit better, more efficiently, and I'm hoping the new mayor is going to be able to do some of this. If we blend that money more together, we'll be able to do things you can't do, each department can't do by itself, but can do supporting each other. And I think that's the number one social crisis in government that we have today, that everybody acts independently of everybody else. Every department acts independently of every other department, and they don't partner. They refer to each other, but they don't blend their resources so that they're all in the same team.
Yes. Maybe they don't know. Maybe it is a thing where people don't know how to blend.
Well, people are.
Yes.
We don't bring in the brightest bulbs
As
because the systems are looking out for themselves. I mean, part of the problem is the federal government, which funds in these silos. The federal government doesn't give behavioral health money to child welfare services. It gives them only to behavioral health departments in cities and towns across the country. So the federal government, if the federal government was blending the money, the city would be able to blend the money. But when you do it by department, when you do it by system, each department, each system sets up its own rules for its own services, and it hires people to be specialized in their services. It used to be, we don't use the term social worker in government anymore because social workers were able to do whatever you needed to help you. The social worker was there to help you. Now in DHS, we have human services case managers. They're not social workers. In fact, DHS makes a policy that they are not to do mental health services. They are not to do homeless services. They're only doing child welfare services, and that the family needs mental health services, they have to refer to that service. If the family needs homeless services, they refer to that service. And the referral system, which broke down probably when I was 8 years old, the referral system doesn't work. And then the few times when it does work, all you're doing is adding yet another
layer, creating bungling
another
and
level of bureaucracy that it inhibits the ability to actually get the job. The people who get the best help from the city of Philadelphia, from their health and human services system, are the people who know how to manipulate that system. There's lots of people out in the street who are very smart people, and they know how to make it all work. But the vast majority of the people who are out there on the street don't know how to make it all work. They rely on the city agencies to work together to help them. And the city agencies don't oppose working together. They just don't have the mechanisms to work together because they all have
Yes.
different funding streams and they're all in different departments. And I've been arguing to the person who's going to be the next mayor of Philadelphia about
Yes.
that. It's like we have to blend the
Yes.
resources. We have to stop fragmenting the resources because that's the reason we can't get the biggest bang for our buck.
You are a very important person, important figure in Philadelphia in child, youth, and family services, human and social. You are very important. Your experience is important. I mean, we value your experience, and the fact that you would make such a poignant and powerful point is quite palpably interesting and intriguing. That is the 21st century, the next problem that we have to try and work around. People in Philadelphia, younger people, older people, we have to, how do we come together, work together to if adequately and effectively respond to some of the social issues that we have? And you just hit the nail on the head. You're saying the ability to be able to work together, cut down some of the added layers in the referral system, and let social workers do social work and find a way to come together. You say, for example, you're saying that if a 17 to 24-year-old youth, I mean, they get social work service, but if they need mental health services, that's a different agency, and so that is quite interesting. So therefore the court are not going to take funding and give it to for that particular, they'll have to probably refer out. And then of course it takes quite some time, and then to get approval because it may be outside of the scope of what they can provide based on the funding and the terms. Yes.
Yes, well, and you mentioned the COAs again. I mean, the reason they were called community umbrella agencies was because they were supposed to be an umbrella that all the various city departments were part of, so that there could be a coherent response to the individual child, the individual family. That never happened. They made
No, it did not.
community instead of the vision that they had for the community umbrella agency.
Yes.
There's some legitimate reasons why this happened, but instead of going under the original model of community umbrella agencies, they converted the community umbrella agencies into arms of the Department of Human Services, which means today in the COAs, there is nobody who provides mental health services. There's nobody who provides services to people who are homeless. There's nobody who provides help to kids who are coming out of the juvenile justice system. It's like at DHS, the COA, you have to refer them someplace else. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars to technology to refer.
Yes.
Instead of spending that hundreds of millions of dollars, blending those dollars together and helping to provide a service that might actually get somebody off the street or keep a kid in their family.
Wow. Yes. And now they have artificial intelligence, open AI, that makes people's work. You can find things much more easily. Say, for example, I wanted to know how to respond to a particular issue. I asked AI told me exactly what to do. In a sense, you have the tools and the technology to give you an understanding and an idea as to what to do. So then again, you talk about how will the technology change the referral system? How will the technology change social work and case management and so on and so forth? That's another conversation for us to have for another day. But I wanted to wrap up the conversation. By the way, I have to read this particular section according to this particular article, Philadelphia is one of the most under-resourced districts, and it takes resources to properly serve students experiencing homelessness. And I like to say that inequity is the defining feature of the Pennsylvania school system. Pennsylvania has a higher than average funding, higher than average educational opportunities, higher than average outcome for students, but that masks huge inequities in both resources that are provided, in the educational opportunities that are provided, and the outcomes we're seeing. All of them have among the largest disparities in the nation. This is part of the story for Pennsylvania. And I think that under identification and failure to serve students experiencing homelessness is a sign of lack of resources and inequity in the way we operate our system. Philadelphia and a lot of other poor communities are shouldering the burden for the whole Commonwealth in that regard. So it's very important that we explore these issues. Now, and that was the end of the article. As it relates to what are the factors that are on the identification of homeless students, what are the factors contribute to under identification of homeless students? Read the article in the Center for Public Integrity. It is entitled, "Where Are the Homeless Children? This Struggling City Isn't Finding Them." Now, and as we wrap up this particular section of the podcast, some time ago, we had you on the show talking about social workers and how they're underpaid, and that creates part of the problem. And there was an announcement that they were going to increase, and of course, we were out front on that news. Thank you so much. There was an announcement that we were going to increase salaries and wages for social workers from about 40 to about what? Is it from 50 to 60,000?
And it did happen. They went from 45,000 a year to $60,000 a year.
Wow, that is a major increase. But I wanted to bring this up because I've been looking for social work jobs, looking at the cost, looking at how much they pay, and I see where they're still offering people 43,000, 45,000. Why are they still offering that low 45 and 50,000, although they have increased it to 60,000?
Well, if you're talking about the core,
okay,
they should not be doing that. They should be offering the higher salary.
Okay,
it's only in this child welfare system that
yes.
Those salaries were increased. So if you're applying for a social worker job or a case manager job in some other system, you're still operating with the lower salaries. But in the child welfare system, the salaries were raised significantly. Now, each agency gets to decide for itself what it's going to offer to new employees who come in their system. And it could be that some agencies, the way the city thinks about it is, if they're going to give you 50 case managers, they'll tell you, you can pay all those case managers $60,000.
Right.
However, an agency might decide that to ratchet it up so that if you're no experience, you start at 45,000. If you have some experience, you get 50. They don't have to spend $60,000 per worker. They get $60,000 per worker, but they can pay somebody $70,000 if they're particularly strong. But that means $10,000 off of everybody else. So it's a little complicated, but they do. Most of the cores are at least in the mid-50s. In the salaries that they're offering today, which is a lot better than 45.
Yes, it's a lot better. And what has been the response? Well, it's since the increase what has been the response in terms of social workers and
the number of people resigning has gone down.
Okay.
I wouldn't say dramatically, but it has gone. People aren't leaving the system as often as they were before, because a lot of work. We did a study and did a survey, and a lot of the case managers in the core system had second jobs. That's how bad it was for them. But now that they're getting $60,000, they don't have to have that second job.
Yes.
And as a result, they stay in the cores. Bigger problem in the cores is not salaries; it's the dysfunction of the regulations and the bureaucracy that makes it hard for the worker to do their job, whether they're getting paid 45 or 60. If they have to spend 85% of their time doing paperwork, kids and the families are not going to be helped. It's just as simple as that. The other thing the next mayor needs to do is to reduce the paperwork burden, at least in the Department of Human Services system, because that paperwork exists primarily because everybody's afraid of being blamed for something. So everything has to be put down on paper. You can't blame me because I have my piece of paper that shows I did what I was supposed to do.
Yes.
And if your whole system is based on covering your ass, then you're going to
Yes.
cover your ass well, but you're not necessarily going to do the services well.
Wow, that's quite powerful. That is powerful. We're talking with a stalwart in Philadelphia. Child, Youth, and Family Services, worked at the highest levels in Philadelphia with government, so on. A quite profound gentleman who you want to pick his brain. You want to, these are the people you look to as we go into the 21st century, or we look to the future. So powerful. What is next for Turning Points for Children? And what is next for Mr. David Fair? I don't know which one you're going to answer first.
Well, my plan is to stay at Turning Points for Children and refocus our work so that we're keeping kids away from DHS rather than waiting for them to get in DHS to get help. And we have, especially when it comes to older youth, the growing number of older youth, if we can help them in that critical stage, say between 17 and 24, if we can get them stabilized and working and appropriately educated and all that kind of stuff, we'll have many more problems for them as they get older. And that's probably our highest priority, is to work with the older youth to keep them safe. And so that when they have children, their children we don't have that generational poverty and generational involvements in the child welfare system. Our job is to break that chain, and that's what we're going to be focused on. That's what we have been doing for 185 years, 188 years, and we want to get back to doing that. The COAs were a sidestep. We're now back on track.
That's great. So, but you're getting rid of the things that distract you. Yes, I know you.
We're getting with it. We're getting away. I mean, we're getting away. We got out of the COA business because of financial issues.
Yes.
The upside of that is we're getting away from services that really struggle to work to doing the kind of services that actually do work, and that gives us something to be proud of.
Yes, that's true. I'm going to end by saying this. I have, as I said, a lot of people know I have worked as a social worker before, or now human services case manager before. But my first time working in social services in the US, I worked at the Juvenile Justice Center of 100 Coulter Street, the Juvenile Justice Center. And
Juvenile Justice Center.
Yes.
That's down the block from where I live.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, just up the street. Okay. And I did IHIPs. I really loved working there. One of the best jobs I've ever had, providing in-home protective services to families. And it was one of the best jobs I saw. Many years after I left IHIPS, they sought me out. And the mother looked for me and said, she called everybody, the whole world trying to find me. And she said, a group of parents, we just wanted to find you because we were going to give up. We wanted to leave. We were just going to give up. And you worked hard and you encouraged me, motivated me. You jumped around and did everything to keep my family together. And today my family is still together. My daughter loves you. She's now in university. My son is doing good. And, such an amazing experience. That was before the core and before it became more. But there was something about IHIPS and there was something about the IHIPS program and what existed before. Yes. Okay. There was a relationship building in a sense, because I don't believe you can work properly with people if you don't develop a relationship. And the program also facilitated and allowed that to happen.
That's right.
Yes.
The COAs is so much paperwork, so much bureaucracy, and so many cases that that you can't it's not the workers' fault. They can't be what you were to that family because they have too many things distracting them. You have to get back to the approach that the goal is stabilizing the family, and then you go back from there and figure out how we're going to stabilize the family. You don't set up a system that is about overburdening workers so they can't get their work done. And that's really what happened with the COAs. And that is true. A big mistake.
And you guys still do family findings and FGDMs?
We still do family finding. We do parenting, education, and support programs. We run 2 food banks, food pantries. I always blank out on the different services we have. Our biggest program is foster care, however.
Okay. Yes.
And we have a good track record of keeping kids in families where the foster parent is kin, is a grandparent or an aunt or a sister,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
the best kind of foster care you can have when you're the child's still in their biological family. And about
Yes.
60% of our foster parents are kin, and we're very proud of that. That's not the case in
Yeah,
other.
and that's what I like about Turning Point for Children, the program, the family finding. I know you have a foster care programs provide foster care services, but you also have a family finding service, which because it's housed in one agency, it can be connected. You can blend that. Okay, it's
That's right.
not
That's
usually when I
exactly right.
used to do case management, you would click a button, family finding, they just click it. No family finding. But when you have an agency like Turning Point that actually do the work of family finding, they really get they really do the work of trying to find family, trying to find community resources to bring the family together around a plan that is workable to keep the family. So, and I'm a big proponent of family finding, big proponent of FGDM. I am big on that, and it's part of strengthening and empowering families. That is one of them. I used to be a pastor as well, and when it comes down to the family and strengthening communities, I was always providing services and resources. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Turning Point and what you guys have to offer as you connect it with your foster care programs and so on. Yes.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And this is where we will leave it. You have anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think I've pontificated enough for one day.
You were great. I love it. I love having you on the show. We will have you again. Keep bringing the stories. If you have breaking news, please let us know. but great. And yeah, man, support us at and if people want to get a hold of David Fair, just so you know, he's on Facebook as David Fair, Fair, and he's also on LinkedIn as David Fair, Turning Point for Children. I don't think you are on Turning Point has a Twitter page. You don't, I think. I don't.
Well, I actually do, but I don't use it.
You know, I realize that, right? But people can find you like that. And just so you know, we're the Neoliberal Round podcast brought to you by the Neoliberal Corporation. We're always serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. Visit us by going to the neoliberal.com and RonaldoCMcKenzie.com. And of course, we will be on YouTube. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel by going to the Neoliberal Round or youtube.com/@RonaldoMcKenzie. This is going to be available tomorrow, sometime Sunday, and all week. We're also going to be available on Spotify in audio and video. If you subscribe to Spotify, you get audio and video. But if you want to find us, on our audio podcast main platforms, you just go to anchor.fm/the Neoliberal, and it will tell you how you can support us and where we are. Amazon Music, iHeart, Apple. There's nowhere where we are not, okay? And don't forget to support us. We're celebrating 3 years as a podcast. So visit us by going and support us. Anchor.fm/the Neoliberal/support. We do need your support. Thank you so much. We're all about empowering people by providing information. Citizenship journalism. Walter. Thank you so much.
Take care, Ronaldo. I'll see you later.
Yeah, man. Peace. All right, this was amazing. Oh, and we need to have coffee. All right, we will have that coffee. All right, bet you.
I'll reach out.
Take care and God bless.